Hello everyone, Stacey Alcorn here, and I am talking about today, Change Your Mind, Change Your Life. This is part 2 of the program. As many of you know, I do this program on Saturday mornings at 7 a.m. It is a 5-part program, and this is just the rerun of part 2 of the program. So again, it's 5 parts, it's 1 hour for each program, total of a 5-hour program. I'm gonna dig right into today's program. And before I do that, actually, I wanna go back and just talk a little bit about what we talked about last week, because each of the 1-hour programs does build off of the previous week's program. So what we talked about last week is that our thoughts influence our lives, that our thoughts have consequences so great that our thoughts create our reality. So what we talked about last week is that the stories of our minds become the stories of our lives. By the way, this all happens whether or not you believe it happens. So whatever you think about constantly, that ends up manifesting into your life, whether you believe that happens or not. Last week we started off just talking about how it is that we can manifest a reality through using our thoughts as human beings. And what we studied last week, we started talking about Isaac Newton, because Isaac Newton discovered the atom, and that the atom was like this particle, this thing, this object. And what Isaac Newton, with his original theories, had come up with is that there were 2 types of things in the world. There were like objects that were made up of atoms. So everything was either an object, or there was also energy. So there were things that could move objects, and the things that could move objects was that energy. And then we talked about how 200 years later, Albert Einstein had come along, and Albert Einstein said something totally different. He said, wait a minute, an atom is not just like this particle. An atom is 99.99% energy, which is mind-blowing, because what that was saying is that all these things that we think are things are actually energy too. So like this table, the wall, everything around us is 99.99% energy. Einstein also discovered the idea of this third-party observer idea, and basically what that is that through scientific tests, we were able to determine that not only are almost everything in the world is 99% energy, but also we learned that a third-party observer, somebody coming and looking at an atom, could change it so that those waves of energy could be collapsed and turned into a particle. This is all mind-blowing stuff, but really, last week's program is for those people who like to understand exactly how the sausage is made. If you need to understand like how it is even possible that your thoughts can influence anything, how your thoughts can change the trajectory of your life, if you need to know how all of that is scientifically possible, go back and watch last week's class. What the conclusion of that class is that we are so powerful as human beings in that we can influence matter with our thoughts. We then talked about how you do that. So we started getting into what are the mechanics of creating something just with our thoughts. And what we learned is it's not enough just to think something. Like I could just think that I want $100 and it's not going to happen. But if I put thoughts plus emotion into my thoughts plus emotions will equal your reality. So whatever it is you want in your life or your business, if you keep putting the same exact thoughts and the same emotion into that thought, all positive, you will eventually manifest it into your life. So we talked about how we are constantly broadcasting out to the universe what we want in life. And so through our thoughts, if we're thinking very negative, or we have negative thoughts around money, which many people do, like, we're broadcasting that out to the universe every single day, and those thoughts are attracting more of the stuff that we don't want. So a lot of this is about mind control, controlling your own thoughts, your own emotions, in order to create the life that you want. So we spoke a lot last week, and I said that if you want a better life for yourself, or better business for yourself, oftentimes what happens this time of year is that we say, you know what, I'm sick of making $50,000 a year in my job as a real estate agent. I want to make $200,000 a year. And the mistake that every real estate agent makes is that they start looking for answers outside of themselves. So they say, I want to make $200,000 this year. So they go out and buy self-help books. They go out and buy Zillow leads. They work on calling 1 million people. And what happens a year later is they see that their results are not that different from where they were the year before. The reason for that is because they never changed who they were in their own head first. And that's where the real work has to get done. All the other stuff is not going to matter unless you do the real work, which is working on the thoughts in your head. If you want a different or better life, then you have to become a different person. So we talked about how your personality creates your personal reality. So if you want a different personal reality, a better life, an easier life, you want to make a lot more money, you want to create positive relationships in your life, you need to create a new personal reality. And we said in order to do that, we have to break one very difficult habit. And the habit that we all have is the habit of being ourselves. And as we were concluding last week, I talked about the reason this is so hard is because to get to a new level in our business or life, we have to become a different person. Yet every single day we wake up and there's evidence of the original us all around us. We're waking up in the same bed, in the same house, in the same town, with the same people around us, the same coworkers, the same food on our table. So we have to rise above in our own heads. We have to rise above the environment, the people, our surroundings. We have to rise above all that in order to, in our own head, live a different life before we can manifest the different life into reality. As we are embarking on Martin Luther King weekend, it's interesting that last week I spoke about people who changed the world. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Gandhi. If you look at anybody who has a massive influence in the world, in history, 100% of those people lived internally a different life than what was going on in the outside world. So they had to break out of the chains of the reality of what was going on around them. So they woke up every day and saw the same difficulty, the same challenges as everybody else, but in their own heads, they rose above it. It was like they ignored what was going on around them in their heads so that they could create a better future for themselves and everybody else. In order to begin manifesting a different life, we have to get good at mentally rehearsing that thinking and feeling. So the things that we think about in our own heads, the things that we talk about in our own heads, because I guarantee you, you're talking to yourself all day long. the things we talk about ourselves to ourselves all day long, and the stuff that emotionally charges us, that's the stuff that is going to create our future. And for many of you guys watching, just like I lived for many years, we don't have like reins on any of it. We just kind of let it all go, and that is not necessarily good. And we're going to talk about that today as we move into part 2. So today we're going to talk about unwiring our old thinking and feeling patterns and reprogramming the brain with new patterns of thinking and feeling based on who we want to be instead. We're going to start breaking the habits of being ourselves. When you condition the body with a new mind, the two can no longer work in opposition, but they have to be in harmony. One thing I want you to think about is that we are addicted to our thoughts. We cannot change anything if we cannot change our thinking. So the reason I say this to you is because as you start going through the process of this 5-week program, as you start like maneuvering your way to new ways of thinking about things, eliminating all the junk that is going on in your head, because that stuff is influencing your life. Like if you think about it, and in one of the stories I shared last week is that, and this is just one example of how stuff sticks with you and you don't even realize it for sometimes for an entire lifetime. So when I was a teenager, when I got my first credit card, I was like 18 or 19 years old, and I went out and maxed it out on clothes and stuff like that. And after going to the mall, I went out to dinner with a bunch of friends, and I went to pay for dinner, and the card was declined. And I remember like the embarrassment of my credit card being declined. And ever since that day, for the rest of my life, when I hand over a credit card, there's like this little fear in the back of my head, like, oh, I hope it doesn't get declined. But think about that. Like, I talked last week about how many of us have issues over money, like the way we think about money. So that little thought of a credit card getting declined like 26 years ago in my life has stuck with me for so long that every time I hand over a credit card, in my own head, I have a negative little emotion tied to it. So what I want you to know is that we have become absolutely addicted to some crazy thoughts in our own heads over our lifetime. And we're going to share some ways as we move through the 5 weeks on how to break out of those addictive thoughts, because all of that is the only way that you're going to create a better and new life for yourself. But as you start to do it, remember, these are an addiction, and it's not unlike like a drug addiction. You're going to have mental thoughts about why you shouldn't be doing this. You're going to have head tricks going on. Many of us are addicted to all different like feelings of guilt, feelings of loss, feelings of unworthiness, feelings of insecurity. Trying to change your emotional patterns is like going through this drug withdrawal. And the only reason I want you to know it is because your system is going to start bucking it when we start working on changing the thought processes. Super hard to break the thought patterns that you are addicted to. When we initially try to break the habit of bad thoughts or bad feelings, our body and our mind is going to resist it. But what I want you to know is that what you feel now is what you're going to attract. So that's going to be the reminder you tell yourself every single time you want to buck your addiction, is say, you know what, my thoughts control what I'm about to attract into my life, and I choose not to have negative thoughts. So as long as we use familiar feelings as a barometer, as a feedback on our efforts to change, we're always going to talk ourselves out of new possibilities. It's going to feel weird once you start working on a new way of thinking, but we will never be able to think greater than our internal environment unless we start doing it. Like, just start thinking differently. We'll never be able to see a world of possible outcomes other than the negative ones from our past unless we start being willing to feel uncomfortable at our own thoughts for a while. Our thoughts and feelings have a great deal of power over us. For true change to occur, you must unmemorize an emotion that has become part of your personality, and then recondition the body to your new mind. Think about this, because we all know people, and maybe you are these people that like just live in misery. Like they're just never ever happy because their misery, their negativity, like they're so addicted to their unhappiness that they live in that unhappiness. And it's like they're just not happy unless they're unhappy. But if you want better for yourself, you got to start breaking the habit. I will say it's definitely easy to feel hopeless when we realize that the chemistry of our emotions has habituated our bodies to a state of being that's often a product of anger, jealousy, resentment, sadness, etc. All of these are just programmed into our subconscious. But the good news is that we can become consciously aware of our tendencies. To change your personality, you have to change your state of being, which is intimately connected to feelings that you've memorized. So until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And what we talked about last week is we don't want to be on a bus waiting to see where the destination is for our life. We want to be able to control the destination. We want to say, this is where I'm going, and know that we're going to get there. Because what we know, what we've learned, what we saw proof of last week is that we can manifest anything. So all around us, sitting right next to you, is absolute opportunity to be, have, and do anything in the world you want. Literally anything. Now, how do we turn that opportunity? How do we manifest the opportunity into a better life? So half of it is going to be come down to your ability to start noticing your unconscious thoughts. And I think some of you probably have already started doing that just from last week's class. So understanding the importance of emotion, that we know the things that we manifest in our life are a result of thoughts plus emotions put together. Those equal our reality. So what I will say is that going through these slides, for example, and going through the several books which helped put this class together, for me, one piece that I started to notice is over time, like what are the things that emotionally charge me? And those are things that are going to be different for everybody listening. But what are the things that like piss you off? Because those are the times you should start asking yourself, like, why am I so angry about this? And then start backing it out. And then asking yourself over time, first you got to figure out, like, what is the stuff that emotionally charges you? Then try to figure out why it emotionally charges you. And then ask yourself, can I get away from the emotion of it all? Because that's when you could start really moving forward. And for me, like, it was one day noticing as I was handing over my credit card, I'm like, wow, it's weird that I worry every single time that my credit card is going to get declined. And I was like, has my credit card ever even been declined? And then I remembered in high school that my credit card was declined when I was out to dinner with friends. So that is a process of looking at this subconscious thing that was going on in my head that I didn't even realize for most of my life. And then realizing that it had this little power over me that was not positive. So you have to start looking for those in your own life. We said positive thinking by itself is not going to get you very far. By itself, conscious positive thinking cannot overcome a subconscious negative feeling. When the mind and body are in opposition, the change is never going to happen. So, like, if you are a person that is always angry about stuff or jealous about stuff or resentful, like, you have to get to the reason why you are so angry or resentful. You have to get to the reason behind it, because if you think you can just say, I'm going to now think positively instead of being angry all the time, it's not going to work. You have to first try to get to the heart of the emotion that you're feeling, because what I will tell you is that you will begin to manifest stuff like crazy once you can control your emotions around the stuff that you care most about, because then what you will find is most of your days you will spend thinking about the present and the future life you are creating, and it will all be around positive thought. And when you spend your days just focusing on the positive things that you expect to happen to you, they begin to just manifest out of the blue. If you've been devoted to feeling negative for years, those feelings have created an automatic state of being. We could say that you are just subconsciously unhappy. Your body has been conditioned to be negative. It knows how to be unhappy better than your conscious mind knows otherwise. You don't even have to think about how to be negative. So for some people, this is going to be a super challenge to figure out how to get yourself out of the negativity. But what I will tell you is it's going to all start with, and every single day I guarantee there are a handful of emotions that you go through. You got to start looking at the stuff that makes you angry, makes you resentful, makes you jealous, makes you sad, and say, why is it bothering me like that? And like, why do I get so upset when that happens? These memorized feelings are holding you back from the potential around you. Memorized feelings limit us to recreating the past. If you keep dwelling on the bad experience you had with a customer, or reliving those familiar feelings that you have day in and day out, you are continually signaling your body with the chemical feeling that it associates with the past. The chemical continuity fools the body into believing that it's still living in that past. So like for me, that credit card experience, how many times did I relive that terrible experience where my credit card got declined 26 years ago? Like countless times I relived a terrible bad experience in my head. But all of us do that in all kinds of weird little situations that we've had in our lives. Maybe it was a parent who told us that we were stupid or didn't love us. Like we live that for the rest of our lives unless you can spot it, which is what the point of this class is to start looking for those, spotting it, getting to the root of it. Like, why do you feel that emotion? Start weeding out so that we can get away from those negative emotions, because we're going to start trying to memorize new and better feelings instead of those old, yucky, memorized feelings we have. Because it is those old, memorized, yucky feelings that have created the life we have right now. And is the life we have right now that bad? No. But is it the best possible version of the life we could have? Probably not. So if you're here to create the best possible version of the life that you could have, you have to dig deep to start weeding out those old negative emotions and experiences that you're reliving over and over in your life. Most people do live most of their life in the past. Most people resist living in the near future. When we're programmed to focus on all the bad stuff behind us, we really have to start creating an about face in our thinking, but you cannot create a new destiny unless you can overcome that past memory of who you feel you are. Many people dream of new possibilities, yet they're compelled to revisit the past day in and day out. What I will tell you is that when you go through this 5-week program, we're going to talk about all the tools and what you can do to create a new and better future for you. But at the end of it, some of you guys are just going to go back to thinking your old thoughts, reliving the husband that walked out on you 5 years ago and left you with the kids, and all kinds of terrible experiences. If you can't let go of those experiences, if you can't let go of the emotions of that, then what I will tell you is your life 10 years from now is going to look a lot like it does right now, and you're still going to be reliving that terrible experience over and over again. So, sometimes you see this, by the way, with people who are stuck in the good old days. If you've ever seen somebody who constantly talks about how 30 years ago they scored the game-winning touchdown of their high school football, like that's the highlight of their lives. Super hard for them to create a new and better life when they've been reliving, even though that was a great experience, still even that great experience they're reliving over and over is not creating the new and better future that is possible for them. We must be different in terms of our responses and our experiences. We must overcome the recurring thoughts and feelings that the body memorizes in order to break the habit of being ourselves. Also, we spent a little time on this last week as well. Our genes are as changeable as our minds. When we think and feel in the same way for most of our lives and memorize familiar states of being, our internal chemical state keeps activating the same genes, meaning that we keep making the same proteins. But the body cannot adapt to these repeated demands, and it begins to break down. If we stay in routine, familiar conditions, creating the same emotional reactions like reliving a past heartbreak or reliving a credit card getting declined, thinking the same thoughts, seeing the same people, memorizing our lives into predictable patterns, our genetic patterns get locked into the same patterns as generations before us. The external environment chemically signals the genes through the emotions and experiences. So if the experiences in your life are not changing, the chemical signals to your genes are not changing. The quantum model, which we talked about a great deal last week, the quantum model asserts that we can signal the body emotionally and begin to alter a chain of genetic events without first having any physical experience that correlates to that emotion. So just like we talked about when we were talking about Albert Einstein, that a third-party observer can come in and influence an energy wave and collapse it into a particle. What we're talking about here is that you can start to manifest the destiny of your perfect life right now in your own head, even though nothing around you looks like the life that you are creating. You can start creating it just in your own head using those thoughts and emotions. We can create emotion just by thought alone. So I said earlier, like a lot of the thoughts we have are just subconscious, and our emotions are subconscious as well. Many of like these events that have emotionally charged us over our entire lifetime stick with us in our subconscious. But the cool thing is that we can create an emotion in our heads just by having a thought around it. And if we can create an emotion powerful enough, we can begin to manifest something. We do not need to win the race, the lottery, or the promotion before we can experience the emotion of those events. So start thinking about the life that you plan on creating for yourself. You have to start living in your own head first. We said last week it's not about having a cause and effect life, which most people think there is. It's about causing an effect, that we cause the life we have. So whatever life you're living, you caused it. everybody has a causing and effect life. We can experience gratitude ahead of the environment to such an extent that the body begins to believe that it is already in that event. As a result, we can signal our genes to make new proteins to change our bodies to be ahead of the present environment. You can change your body through your thoughts too. Through the process of mentally rehearsing an activity, we can derive benefits without even lifting a finger. In his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza, he actually shares scientific studies done where they took a group of people. If you take two different groups of people and you do one that does no exercise or anything, and each day just check their muscle to see if there's been any muscle growth. And then you take a separate group of study candidates, and those people in their head go to the gym once a day, and they work out and lift weights just in their head. So they show up at the gym once a day in their head. And what they found through studies like this is that the people that mentally rehearse going to the gym every single day, they will have muscle growth. It's not the same muscle growth, or not to the same extent as somebody that goes into a gym every day, but it is to a higher extent than somebody that does nothing at all. So the whole point of it is seeing the stuff you do in your head can even impact your muscles. We talked a little bit about that last week too, just saying that, oh, my slide stopped. There we go. Going backwards. We talked about it last week as well with the study with the healers on the test tubes, like influencing the genes, that they could unwind DNA just by mentally focusing thoughts and emotions onto doing so. So I want you guys to think about it, because what thoughts are you mentally rehearsing? So anything that you mentally rehearsal every day will come about in your life, as long as it's got the thoughts and emotions. And even if you're not trying to do this, thoughts are happening in your head all day long. So you're mentally rehearsing something. You just might not have control over it. So why not take control to create what you want? When you have thoughtfully rehearsed a future reality until your brain has physically changed to look like it has had the experience, and you have emotionally embraced a new intention so many times that your body is altered to reflect that it has had the experience, hang on, because this is the moment that the event finds you. So to influence your reality, the environment, to heal your body or change some event in the future, you have to completely let go of your external world. You have to release your awareness of your body. You have to lose track of time. You have to basically become pure consciousness. In the present, all potential exists simultaneously in the quantum field. When we stay present in this moment, we can move beyond space and time, and we can make any of those potentials around us a reality. When we are stuck in the past, none of that potential exists. Just because I want to go back for a second on our ability to not only change our thoughts, but also actually physically change our bodies just by using our thoughts. One story I shared last week is about Dan Cummings, just because I think this is so powerful. So for the last 10 years, I've interviewed hundreds of CEOs, world changers, people who have done great things. One of my favorite interviews is one that I did with Dan Cummings from Massachusetts. And Dan Cummings, when he was 19 years old, was out on a boat partying with his friends, drinking, and jumped off the side of the boat and cracked his spine and was told he will never walk again. He became a quadriplegic, so he could not move his arms or his legs, basically couldn't move below his neck. And went to all the best hospitals in Boston. All the hospitals said, we're going to prepare you for a life in a wheelchair. You will absolutely never walk again. You'll never move your arms again. You're going to be a quadriplegic for the rest of your life. And now he's in his 30s. So long story short, he does walk, although with the aid of a walker. He does move his arms, he eats, he's mobile, and he runs a business called Journey Forward. And basically what Journey Forward does is it teaches people how to walk again. If you're told, it's a company built for people who've been told they will never walk again. So I spent a great deal of time with Dan because I'm intrigued. So I said, well, first of all, do you think you had some kind of rare crack, or maybe it wasn't really a spinal cord injury? Maybe they thought you had a spinal cord injury, because basically nobody can recover from a spinal cord injury. And he said, no, I had a spinal cord injury, and the doctors, all the Boston hospitals, said I would absolutely never walk again. And he said that it took several years for him to walk again. He said, number one, absolutely never for even 1 second, even though he had been told 5,000 times he would never walk again. He said never, ever once did he accept that, and never for 1 second did he believe he would never walk again. So that's one big piece. So in his own head, he never for 1 second thought that he would never walk again. And then he said that he went through intense physical therapy. What they do at Journey Forward, the business that he now runs, because he's passionate about teaching other spinal cord injured people that they can potentially walk again, is they put, if you can't move your legs, they have other machines too, but specifically on the legs, they hook you into a harness on a treadmill. So you go like 3 times a week. They put you into a harness, and so you're on a treadmill, and there's somebody standing on each side of you helping you move your legs, so it looks like you're walking on the treadmill. And so they put these probes on your legs so that they can see if there's any nerve stimulation, any nerves coming alive on your legs. And he said that typically people have to go through that for several years, over and over, week after week. And he said the most important part of all of it is you have to 100% believe that you're going to walk again. Because he said where most people don't end up making it is that, he says, it's intense. You're on year 2 doing this over and over, and it's really hard to believe in your own head that you're going to walk again. And so a lot of people do give up. But he said it's, in his opinion, it's 99% mental. And if you know 100% you're going to walk again, and you keep showing up year after year doing that walk on the treadmill, he said what happens is all of a sudden one day we get a little teeny indication that one nerve is coming alive in one little area of your leg. And he said, and once that one nerve comes alive, we know that you're probably going to walk again. So think about that, because I mean, the stuff we're talking about is building a better life. Like, we want to make $500,000 a year. We want to buy houses and help lots of charitable organizations. But also, there's going to be people out there watching this like, I just want to walk again. But anything is possible. And back to my story with Dan, I said to Dan, all right, is it possible? Because it's so out there. Like, is it possible that there's some people that really can never walk again with a spinal cord injury. And he said, I don't believe that. He said, for me personally, he's like, I believe that anybody that had a spinal cord injury can walk again. He said, that is my belief. And he said, I had a spinal cord injury. I was told I would never walk again, and I walk. So he said, I think it's all 100% mental. And all of it goes into everything we're saying today, that you can do anything with your thoughts. If you focus your thoughts, your positive emotions, you will manifest anything, even if it seems to the rest of the world like it might be a little bit impossible. So remember that many of us live all day, every day in this past. And the problem with living in the past is there's lots of negative stuff that might have happened in your past. So we got to start letting go of it. We have to start noticing the bad emotions that we're having, the negativity, the fear, stuff like that. We're going to start noticing it, trying to get to the root of it, to figure out why we even feel that way. We're going to start letting go of it, because if we keep focusing on that stuff, if we keep letting our subconscious dictate, then we're going to keep creating our past over and over. And what's going to happen is one day you're going to wake up 100 years old and you're going to realize you relived your past every single day. You're going to realize that your husband who walked out on you 50 years ago has predicated your entire life, like the negativity behind that. And you hopefully want better for yourself. Let's talk about memorized emotions. You have an experience which has an emotional charge, like a heartbreak or a credit card getting declined or your car getting repossessed, or could be anything. You're getting fired at your job. Then you have a thought about that past event. The thought becomes a memory, which then reproduces the emotion of the experience. And I know you guys have had this, where that just the thought of it alone brings up like the anger or the sadness. If you keep thinking about that memory repeatedly, the thought, the memory, and the emotion all merge as one, and it just becomes a memorized emotion. Now living in the past becomes less of a conscious process and more of a subconscious one. We have what is called conditioned responses. So like if you've ever cried at a song that reminds you of an old breakup, anxiety around your credit card issue, or just people that emotionally charge you, you know we have conditioned responses to stuff. Sometimes those conditioned responses stick. Our response to something is automated, then it turns into a mood that can last weeks to months. It becomes our temperament, and sometimes it becomes our personality trait. So if it bothers you that bad, whatever it is that happened to you, it could be a massive injustice, it becomes your personality trait, and you become bitter, resentful, angry. So for others of us, we spend maybe not so much time living in the past, but instead we spend a great deal of time worrying about the future, which is also not good. So think about the stuff that worries you about the future. Listing presentations, some real estate agents get anxiety just with a blocked phone call. We're in the business of answering our phones. So what happens if you can't answer your phones because you get anxiety if it's a blocked phone call? Client meetings might give you anxiety. Speaking events might give you anxiety. The problem with that is that your body begins to respond to that future event as if it's unfolding right now. You are creating the story in your head that will become the story of your life. So when it comes to thinking about your listing presentation, instead of feeling worry and anxiety, I want you to focus on winning the listing presentation. I want you to focus on what a perfect listing presentation would look like, and I want you to rehearse it over and over in your head. I want you to focus on how the clients love you and how you overcome every objection and how you smooth sail through the presentation. and they sign the contract. When calls come, I want you to picture on the other end of that line is probably $1 million customer that needs my services. When you're picturing client meetings, I want you to think the best possible scenarios for your client meetings, your speaking events. If you have a speaking event, instead of worrying about what you're going to say or am I going to choke on my words, like focus on the best possible speaking event. Relive that, start living it in your head. You have to start being able to overcome time. Overcoming your nearly automatic habits and no longer anticipating the future requires the ability to live greater than time. This is a great example. I shared this in the webinar on Saturday as well. I was sitting with an agent and he had asked for some help with his business planning, and I went to his office, and sitting on the cork board right in front of his desk was an ATM receipt with like $2 on it, $2. And I said to him, I'm like, why do you have an ATM receipt with $2 on your cork board that you see every single day while you're sitting at your desk? And he said, oh yeah, he's like, that was the worst time in my life. And it was the day that I couldn't pay rent for my apartment. I couldn't even afford lunch for myself. I was down to my last $2 that I owed. So I keep the receipt as a reminder so that I never get there again. So needless to say, this was an agent who was really struggling, like not making it in real estate at all. And I said, number one, that receipt is like one big chunk of your problem, because I could see what's going on in your mindset is you're like reliving that $2 moment over and over in your own head. And until you get past it, you're not going to be able to create a better future for yourself. So what I said to him is go online and you can Google ATM receipts, and you will find all kinds of ATM receipts. The one that I have on here is an ATM receipt with like $3 million in it. I just got that off of Google, and I said put that ATM receipt on your board. So that's what you're looking at every day. Like picture that's where you're moving forward to in your life, and start picturing what life is like as you have $3 million, how you'd be living, how you'd be spending the money, and start picturing like who is the type of person that has $3 million, what's their life look like? Because that's the life you got to start living in your head, not reliving 5 million times over and over the time you went to get money from the ATM and you had no money for even lunch. So you have to stop living in that past. If you know that by staying present and severing or pruning your connections with the past, you can have access to all the possible outcomes in the quantum field, why would you choose to live in the past and keep creating the same future for yourself? Live your potential future now. Instead of obsessing about some traumatic or stressful event that you fear is in your future based on your experience of the past, obsess about a new desired experience that you have not yet embraced emotionally. Allow yourself to live in that potential new future now. I have a great story. I didn't even share this one at on last Saturdays, but many of you know, first of all, I read a ton. I read 50 plus books a year, and one of my favorite books is Seth Godin. Well, not books, author Seth Godin. He's written a million different books. He's like a marketing guru, and I love Seth Godin. And it was this time, not last year, but the year before, I think. It wasn't the last 3 years. And what you'll start to learn as you practice this stuff is how to get yourself out of a funk. Like, how do you because what happens when you're in a funk is you start attracting really bad stuff. And sometimes it's hard. You're just in a funk. Typically with real estate agents, it's this time of year. It's like December, January, February, because you don't have real estate closings like you do in April, May, and June. So, sorry, I'm getting over a cold. So a few years ago, I love Seth Godin, and he's untouchable. So first of all, just to get him to come do his speaking events, like $100,000. And so I've never had him out to come do a speaking event. I've reached out in the past because I've always wanted to interview him for an article because I'm obsessed with interviewing people. And so a few years ago, I was in a funk. So it's the middle of the winter. It's like in January. It's this time of year. I'm in a funk. The market's slow. And when the market's slow, real estate agents are never happy. There's not a lot of money coming in. And the Inman conference, Inman, New York City, is every year in January. So I was like laying in bed one night and I'm just in a funk. I'm depressed. At least I realized that I had to figure out a way to get myself out of the funk. So I said, you know what? I was on my computer and I saw Seth Godin was going to be speaking at the Inman conference in New York City. So I said, well, that's a great way to get myself out of the funk. I want to go to New York City, and not only that, I'm going to get an interview with Seth Godin. Now, most would never know this unless you're into Seth Godin. Like, getting an interview with Seth Godin is practically impossible. So I set out, I am going to go out and interview Seth Godin while I'm at the Inman conference. I have no idea how I'm even going to get there, but I put the intention out to the world, and I knew I was heading out on just a few-day journey to put myself back into a better place mentally. So I booked the trip for a couple of days. On my way to New York City while I'm on the plane, anytime I travel, I look for different people I can interview anyways, so that even if I didn't get the Seth Godin interview, I knew I was going to interview some cool people while I was in New York City. So I was like, all right, who do I know that lives in New York City so I can reach out and get some interviews? Well, Hal Elrod is a friend of mine. He wrote the book, The Miracle Morning, and he had introduced me a while ago to a girl who lives in New York City, and her name's Sadia, and she owns a hat company, and she's been in like Vogue magazine. Her hat company has gone international, so it's like in Paris and Italy. So I had remembered he had introduced me to Sadia a while ago, and I had never really connected with her. So while I was on the plane to New York City, I emailed Sadia and I said, hey Sadia, I was introduced to you a while ago by Hal. I would love the opportunity, since I'm in New York City for a couple of days, if I could come interview you about how you became successful in your business. So this lady is a complete stranger. She emails me while I'm on the plane. She said, yeah, when your plane lands, come to this pier. I'm at a clothing show for the entire day, and I'm going to be at my booth. You can come interview me while I'm at my booth. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay. So I get off the plane. I run to the hotel. I put all my stuff away, and I head off to a new adventure to meet this girl who I don't even know and interview her because I'm going to write an article about her. So I get to the place and I'm doing my interview. I basically ask questions like, who are you? Where'd you come from? How did you become a hat maker? And while I'm there, so I'm only there for about an hour, we hit it off. She's a wonderful girl, an amazing entrepreneur. And she asked me what I was in New York City for. And I said, oh, I'm here for a real estate conference. And I said, what's interesting is the way she's grown her business. Seth Godin, the author, always talks about marketing. And he says that we are all artists and that whatever we do, if we are a writer, if we are at Dunkin' Donuts making coffee, whatever we are doing in our lives, we are an artist at that time because we are creating something and shipping it out to the world. That is Seth's whole thing. And so I said to her, the reason I came out to the Inman conference is I am obsessed with Seth Godin. And I said, have you ever heard of Seth Godin? Because you make hats, like you're shipping your art out to the world. You would love Seth Godin. And she says, yeah, not only do I know Seth Godin, he's my personal mentor and coach. And right there, I knew that like the universe just did something so spectacular that I, in a million years, could not have even tried to orchestrate. And I said, Seth Godin's your coach? And she said, yeah. And I said, oh, because I'm here and I'm going to see him speak tomorrow. And one of my dreams has been to someday interview Seth Godin. And she said, oh, okay, I'll put you on a text string right now. And within 15 minutes, I had a breakfast meeting for the following morning scheduled with Seth Godin. Like, you cannot possibly make up how that could have ever happened. I had no idea in a million years that this girl, a complete stranger, had any tie whatsoever to Seth Godin. And next day I had breakfast with him. So I ended up getting 2 awesome articles, plus a couple others out of that event. But the point is, for me, one of the ways I break out of my funks is I stop focusing on the negative, depressing situation I'm in, and I look to go out and just open new doors and meet new people and interview new people and focusing on the next thing. And when you're doing what you're meant to do, like the universe conspires and helps you along. I'm going to run a few minutes over, but the main obstacle to breaking the habit of being yourself is thinking and feeling equal to your environment, your body, and time. To do this, you'll have to get into a flow, an altered state of consciousness where time stops. There is no worry, there is no fear, there is no creation. The only reason I wanted to bring up that story about Seth as well is that if all you're doing is worrying and focusing on your past problems, then you are not in a state of creation, you're in a state of survival. And the best things in life are created when you are in a creation mode. So you have to think about, like, what are the things in your life that time stops for you? That when you're doing that one thing, time stops for you. And for me, time stops when I'm interviewing somebody to write an article. Time stops for me when I'm writing an article. So you've got to be in those states of creation in order for the universe to do its work. So yeah, I could have stayed at home and lamented in bed about how bad the market was 3 years ago, or I could get up, get out to New York City and start meeting people and doing the stuff that is creative for me. So are you in survival mode or are you in creator mode? If we focus on the unwanted past or our dreaded future, then you are living in stress and you are living in survival mode. If you're obsessing over health, which is survival of your body, paying your mortgage, which is like survival from the elements, like shelter, or you're focusing on not having enough time to do what you need to do to survive, most people live in survival mode. And the universe cannot create good things for you if you are in that state of survival. I also like to talk about how different we are than animals. So animals don't have the ability, or I should say disability, of turning on their stress response so frequently or holding on to it forever. Animals don't hold on to their stress forever. So, like I said last week, if you go to Africa and there's like a bunch of bison in a big group, 200 of them milling around eating, and a lion comes in and kills one and eats the bison, 15 minutes later, all the bison just go back to normal. They're eating, like everything is back to status quo. What would happen in our lives? In our lives, we'd be reliving the stress of what just happened, that a lion just came in and ate our friend who was standing there 5 minutes ago. So animals let stuff go immediately. They're not holding on to it in their subconscious. Human beings, we relive it over and over and over and over. But by doing so, we're living in a state of stress, which is a state of survival, not creation, which means we're not creating great stuff for our lives. The difference between animals and humans is that although we both experience stress, humans re-experience it, and we pre-experience it through worry. We re-experience and pre-experience traumatic situations over and over. Why are people so negative? They're stuck in the past. The present is all possibility in the quantum field. You cannot access it without being present. You must be in a creative state, not a state of survival. You must, moving forward into the coming 3 weeks of this program, you must start noticing your emotions, your thoughts, and your conditioned responses. It is the first step towards changing them. Then you must begin to find opportunity to live in the present through a creative state or through focused mindfulness. You have to deny yourself addictive thoughts. Many of us are addicted to our problems and unfavorable circumstances or unhealthy relationships. We keep these situations in our lives to feed our addiction to survival-oriented emotions so that we can remember who we think we are as a human being. We love the rush of energy that we get from our problems. Can't focus on them. No matter whether we are in a bad job or bad relationship, we hold our troubles close to us because they help reinforce who we are as somebody. They feed our addictions to low-frequency emotions. We have to halt unloving thoughts towards ourselves. We must become quantum observers of our own thoughts and feelings. We must become conscious of our unconscious mind. We must pay attention to our previously unconscious actions. We must decide to halt any thought, behavior, or emotion that is unloving towards ourselves. We have the power to observe our own thoughts. We can decide how we no longer want to be, think, act, or feel. The ability to self-reflect allows us to scrutinize ourselves and then make a plan to modify our behavior so we can produce a better outcome. We have to start examining our beliefs about life, ourselves, our others. You are what you are where you are, and you are who you are because of what you believe about yourself. Your beliefs are the thoughts you keep consciously or unconsciously accepting as the law in your life. Whether you are aware of them or not, they will affect your reality. So the more you observe, the more you awaken from the state of unconscious mind into conscious awareness. So start unlearning yourself. Your goal is to begin unlearning yourself so you can free up energy to create the new personality that you will need to create the new you, to create the new life you want. You cannot create a new personal reality as the same personality. You will have to become someone else. Metacognition is your first step. So become self-aware to prevent unwanted states of mind and body. These are the same 5 books I talked about last week. Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, Joe Dispenza. The Power of Intention, Dr. Wayne Dyer. What to Say When You Talk to Yourself, which I'm going to spend a great deal of time on in part 3. before I go to part 4, where we spend more time talking about breaking the habit of being yourself and start focusing on different ways we can meditate out of those very difficult thoughts that we keep holding on to, even though we try to let them go. Promptings by Cody Bateman, the founder of Send Out Cards, and Psycho-Cybernetics. Thank you. I know we ran a few minutes over, but thank you for joining me for part 2 of Change Your Mind, Change Your Life. Have a great day.